Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, how are you, dear?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing well. It is shockingly late on Monday. The day flew away from me.
Yeah. I mean, I went to the Falcons game yesterday, and that day flew really quick too. I feel like the days are just getting shorter.
In terms of busyness, or like the movement of the sun and
Like
moon and how we're traveling around.
I don't know if we're getting into all that stuff.
No, but like where do we lie in daylight savings time? Because isn't there a shortest day of the year and then a longest day of the year? Yeah. There's I see Katie, I see our guest nodding in the background. She's like, yes, I know you are butchering this. I know what it is. She's like, I know what's going on. But no, I think we're moving into the longer days. I don't know.
Maybe it's because we've been so busy.
Yes.
It might just be that. That's also probably it. But what'd you do this weekend? How was everything? All the things.
Everything was great. All the things are great. I went and saw my best friend. We went and got lunch with another friend. We took down her Christmas stuff, watched a couple movies, hung out with my nephew, did a little bit of shopping, bought some throw pillows. It was very
busy bee.
As Jack says, I'm a body in motion. I have to be doing something at all times. But how was the game? Was it pouring at the game? Because it was awful weather in Woodstock.
Well, remember, Mercedes-Benz is covered. So
I didn't know that. I forgot.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So the stadium's covered. I think they could open it up from the middle, but it was pouring outside, and it was so fun though. In regards to like sitting at the suite level and seeing everything basically happen right in front of you, and then like you go through like the players' tunnels, and you see the players start walking out. It was a great experience. It kind of made me think, hey, if I'm going to a game, whenever I'm going to the game next, I want to make enough to where I just want to sit in the suite. I don't want to go up in the stands. I don't want to be outside. I don't want to be uncovered. I want to be able to sit down, stand up, get a beer whenever I want, and watch the game. So maybe it's a new thing to attain, to strive for, I guess.
Gotcha. Like first class flying. You just want to be sweet seat. See, I forgot that it was covered because the last time I was at Mercedes-Benz, I went to a United game and it was open. So I think I maybe forgot or did not know it was able to be closed, because I don't venture down there. The traffic is awful. It's not my favorite.
That was pretty bad too.
Yeah.
Oh, but overall, a great time, great experience.
Good.
I can't complain. There were free tickets. Good. So
yeah, you can't beat free.
Yeah.
If it's free, it's for me. That's what my friend's boss says. All right. Well, let's go on ahead and get off the topic of the weekend and onto the topic for today, which is Facebook groups for e-commerce businesses. And we have with us Katie Wight with KW Content. Katie, how are you?
Good. How are you? So
doing good. Oh, we are so happy to have you. So tell us, are we moving into shorter days or
the days are getting longer now? Yeah. Oh. I'm very familiar with this because I live in I'm in the northern, I'm really close to Canada. So December 21st, I think, I might be wrong about that, is the shortest day. So we're all very aware once they're moving in the right direction here.
Gotcha. Okay. So we've already passed that point. I knew there was a shortest day of the year and it was dark and cold. I just didn't know when.
So dark. Yeah.
The 21st. Okay.
It's 21st-ish.
And it's got to just be a busy thing. We've just been so busy. It's
add the busyness levels to the short days. And we're just
Well, and you know all about being busy, being an entrepreneur. Tell us what exactly you do with KW. How did you get into the space?
Yeah. So I always tell people I started my career at Burton Snowboards, which is the world's biggest snowboarding company. And I was just fresh out of college, a French speaker at the time. So I got hired into their kind of sales support team for the Quebecois contingent. And so I was kind of helping there. And then I made my way into marketing there. And so at the time, it was really, I think they had been on Instagram was really new. This was like 11 years ago. And And our social media manager left. I was working in I was doing blog production and copywriting. Our social media manager left, and I was the youngest person in the department. And they were like, we're not even going to list this job. Katie's going to do it. So that's how I got into it. And it was trial by fire because there were 3 brands sitting under Burton. And I was managing all 3 on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. So it was a wild ride. So
wow.
Here we are. Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah, Burton's a massive company too.
Yeah.
Was it that big 10, 11 years ago?
It has grown very incrementally over the years. So basically as big as it's been. It was the biggest snowboarding company in the world back then, still is. And super fun place to work. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure you got hooked up with a lot of awesome free stuff. Great gear. Every time. I've gone 3 times, and anytime I went to rent a snowboard or anything, it was all Burton.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason I'm familiar with the brand.
Yeah, they have a really good. They kind of have a stronghold on the rental program. So really good program for kind of learning to ride. So gear that's beginner friendly and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I've never heard of it, but I was born and raised in Georgia, still live here, and I've never been to like snowboarding country. The first north I've been is Ohio, and they just don't snowboard in Ohio. And if they do,
so we need something to keep ourselves busy up here in the short days and it's cold out.
Oh, I believe it. Well, let's talk about kind of the history. So you said you used to manage it on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter alone takes so much time, I feel like.
And you know what? If we're being honest, it wasn't. I always talk to people about Twitter. I'm like, Twitter is a completely different, unless you can do it right, unless you're news hacking, it really should be a separate strategy. But back then, a lot of brands were just kind of repurposing their content across a lot of different channels. So we were more reducing the captions. Every once in a while, we'd do something funny. But it was a Twitter light strategy, probably.
Gotcha. Because I was going to say, like, managing those 3 channels is hard enough on its own. When you look at Twitter now, and I'm not a personal Twitter user, and I certainly wasn't back then, but when you look at the life cycle of a tweet now, it's 7 minutes?
So short.
I mean, to remain relevant, you just buy a Twitter person, set them in a chair.
Know. Exactly. That's always on. So totally.
Find yourselves a Katie.
Get a Katie.
Get a Katie.
And they are at a company like that where there's a lot of it was a lot of work, but kind of being in a position where there was a lot of content. So Burton had a lot of photographers, videographers, team riders, and so we would do some social specific photo shoots and stuff like that. But I was pretty well stocked with visuals at all times. So really kind of curating those visuals, trying to hop on trends. At that time, it was like you could get, trending hashtags or something on Instagram at that time. So trying to hit that top post for those, that was, and writing a lot of captions and that kind of thing, community management. So it was a lot that I was supported.
Did they at least bring down a strategy or a marketing plan or roadmap for you when you started to transition?
So back then, no. A lot of what I do now is very much, I think the biggest lesson I learned at that point was what a large gap it can feel like between, because Burton has a really strong sense of self, a really strong sense of brand. But being in that seat too, and when you're working in social media and everyone can see it, and everyone, it's like all of your work is on display, and everyone, it's kind of shiny, and everyone kind of has an opinion. And so, at that point, I really kind of realized just what a gap there really can be between what we think as a marketing leader is a really strong brand strategy, but then what it takes to activate that every single day. And so a lot of the work I've done since then is really about kind of trying to bridge that gap and interpret that. Like, if we have a strong sense of brand and brand identity and brand strategy, okay, but what else do we need for a social media manager to actually be set up for success and activate in a way that not only drives growth, but also feels on brand, nurtures your community, all of that stuff. So at the time, no, but I'm sure they do now. Yeah.
I hope so. And so is that where you would start? Would you start with a brand, whether they're new, whether it's, a subsidiary, whatever the case is, with them identifying their own brand, their own voice, their own messaging, and then taking that to social media? Or I guess, how does that transition work? Where's this bridge coming into play?
Yeah, it's a great question. So always, I mean, I think as a social media marketer, I think we see a lot of brands who, you have legacy brands who've invested in their brand strategy and they know that's really important. And that's a really easy place to then interpret content and social media strategy from. When we encounter brands that don't have that piece yet, we at least need to hone our unique value proposition, have a really strong understanding of our competitive opportunity, our target persona mindset, and then our brand persona. Those are kind of the 4 pieces that we will do a quick and dirty brand strategy on before we start any content strategy. So I kind of think of it as brand strategy, content strategy, and then social strategy. So we see a lot of people in our space really just talking about, social strategy as, what topics are we covering? Are we doing a lot of reels, right? Are we doing Facebook groups, what have you? But I want to take that a step back. And I think the bridge between brand strategy and social strategy is that content strategy piece. So what conversations are we having and what stories are we telling that systematically grow, convert, retain? And I think kind of addressing that at a topical and positioning level before getting into the nitty gritty of tactics and publishing content is really important and often overlooked.
Is that something that you continuously audit? Because, when you're having all the initial conversations, it can sound amazing to the 4 or 5 people in the room, even the 2 people in the room that are just talking it through.
That's the easy part.
Yeah. But then when you actually go to execute it, you could get 2 eyeballs and both of them just dropped off the page, never bought anything.
Yeah.
I guess, how often are you auditing it? What do you have to have in place before going through and executing and publishing and writing blogs and making TikTok reels and all the good stuff, all the fun stuff, I would say?
All the fun stuff. Yeah. So I think how often you audit will probably depend a little bit on how aggressive you're being in terms of the volume of posts. So we will talk to a lot of brands and say, if you're only posting 12 to 15 times a month, maybe wait 3 months before you audit. So you have a really good sample size. But we have a client right now who we just rolled out. First 30 days, we grew, but not as much as I wanted to. And so 30 days in, I'm getting my hands dirty. I think what you really need is, for me, the biggest differentiator for us and how we look at it is and I think everyone should, everyone should take this, is content pillars. When you Google or search for content pillars, you can scroll for pages and pages. And content pillars, I should back up, is the most popular sort of form of content strategy. It's the most popular framework. You can scroll for pages and pages, and you will see dozens or more definitions of content pillars that treat them as topics, categories that your brands can talk about. The problem is that there's no definition that aligns these content pillars to your actual business goals. So I always think 3 business goals: grow, convert, retain. We need to generate demand, close demand, and then retain that. And so what happens is, if you actually align your content pillars to those goals, now you can actually measure the performance of your content appropriately. So a lot of times people will measure the performance of a product post, for example, the same as a different kind of just for fun social post. And they think that product post isn't working because it didn't get as many likes as the other one. But that's all wrong, right? We don't want to stop posting about our product. So if you can set yourself up with a framework that tells you, okay, this category of content is meant to grow, then you know that you're auditing performance by shares, right? How is it organically growing your account? And then your pillar 2 is about your product. You're measuring the efficacy by clicks to your website or sales right from that app. And, maybe the 3rd pillar, if that's about community and retention, you're looking more at shares, saves, comments, those kind of things. So I think that's the most important thing. You need to understand what each type of content is supposed to be doing so you can measure it appropriately and then adjust accordingly.
I love that. It's focusing on the R in SMART goals, the relevancy part, which I think people often just completely ignore. It's we want to grow, we want to get X number of likes on every post and X number of followers and whatever. It's okay, but how is that relevant to the overall business goals?
Totally. Yeah.
You got to sit down and evaluate that part of it.
I think that's something that's happening a lot right now with Reels, with TikTok, is you're seeing, okay, these tactics work really, really well to grow an audience. But over the past year, you've seen a lot of folks kind of talking about, okay, yeah, I did grow by 100,000 followers, but actually Reels might not be the best way to get you customers, because the folks who are kind of just exploring the Reels tab and following funny content might not be the same kind of mindset as your buyer. So it's really important. Yeah.
So how do you find the attribution between the two? Right. I mean, you can grow your brand presence, and that's great. I think it's fantastic for you to grow a brand presence, but how do you contribute or attribute those that you find on TikTok, let's say, to your actual customers?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is something that is an ongoing challenge for sure. I think brands have been really smart about implementing sort of insight surveys when they get new customers. Where did you find us? Where did this happen? Being much smarter about kind of partnerships when you have folks coming in from other brands' platforms, making sure that you're tracking that and segmenting that. And there's certainly ways like within Google Tag Manager to track the flow of traffic. So if you have a direct hit from TikTok and then they check out at that time. For us, a lot of times it's a little bit more elementary than that. And we're really looking at like total audience size, total customer, total customer, like volume of customers, and then also average order value. So average customer value, one of the things that I think is oftentimes overlooked within social and the value of social is loyalty. And so when you really focus on that loyalty piece, we see time and time again that we'll just see a correlation of the same 90 days that we roll out a content strategy that's focused on that, we'll see average order value go up by 10, 20, 30%. So I'm definitely not an attribution scientist, but I think it's really important, especially for smaller brands too, to know that just reading the data and watching the patterns, and when you're implementing things kind of one at a time and paying attention to the overall business is also a very effective way. It gets more and more complicated the bigger that you are, the more sales that you're driving, for sure.
Yeah, and we've had that conversation with someone recently from Conversion Guides, actually, and they were saying a lot of the same strategies as you were saying, including just having a form on your site about how did you get here, and the checkout, how'd you hear about us, and where'd you find out about the product, stuff like that. So when you are creating social content, how does that, I guess, tie into the content? And you talked about the content pillars, but does the content pillar say, hey, my brand can talk about thermoses or insulated, like
tumblers?
Tumblers. Yeah. That is the word.
Yeah.
Or I guess where does that conversation start, and then where does the content creation start also?
Yeah. I love talking about this. So I always I kind of try to describe it as it starts to feel less complicated when you think about it in terms of when we try to go make friends, right? If you have someone that back when we used to go to cocktail parties or networking events in Burton, and you would know someone was going to be there that you wanted to connect with, right? You were probably going to try to find something you had in common, right? So you both enjoy the same sport or the same pastime or hobby. And if all else fails, maybe you both have kids, you can always start the conversation there, right? So you're finding mutual ground. And that, because if you were just to walk up to someone and start talking about yourself, which is what a lot of brands do on social, and it doesn't get us very far, this person would be like, I don't have time for this narcissist. I got to see myself over. So what you want to do is find that mutual ground, because if you're thinking about it, then you can, if you guys have ever been in a conversation like that and you drop something that there's a mutual interest, and the person, you can see in their eyes, they're like, oh, and there's trust right there in that moment that builds up. And that's the same thing you want to do on social. So for brands, I think of the 3 pillars. The first one that's meant to grow your brand really should be focused on shareable content that bridges the gap between your customer and you. So a really easy example of this is food and beverage products, recipes, right? That I can read and I can find value from, even if I don't use your specific product, like I can substitute something else. That's really low hanging fruit. Patagonia does a lot of like environmental outdoor and photography that's just aspirational. People are going to see that, their customers are going to see that. And even if they're not extreme enough to be out in the backcountry, they're going to think that's really, really cool. So that's kind of the first pillar, and that's how you want to think about it. And I think the nuance comes in in your point of view and making sure that that content pillar is really unique to you and really defendable and not kind of the same thing that everyone else will say. But so that's how you work on pillar 1. Pillar 2 is about your product. So that's really great. User generated content, results, benefits, features, that kind of thing. And then pillar 3 is really, a lot of folks in our industry talk about the know, like, and trust model, and they'll advocate for that kind of in all of marketing. And I want to stick it all into just pillar 3, because I feel like that's not actually what builds trust. What is getting to know you. What builds trust is if a consumer feels like the brand understands them. So that's where you want to start with pillar 1, right? So that's kind of how we break it down. And we'll start with really high level. Like pillar 1, this content is all about making our customer feel this way, connecting on this topic. Pillar 2 is all about the product. Pillar 3 is about behind the scenes, our mission, our values, our supply chain, things that people will kind of, after the functional needs of the product meet my needs, then what else will keep them around? So then once you have those 3 pillars kind of set up, then we start to make a playbook to really bring it to life. Here's all the examples of how this can come to life. And then that should be kind of what makes it really efficient to create strategic content month in and month out, is if you're working from that playbook.
Well, when you're 100%. And I was just gonna say, like, when you're first starting out working on that pillar 1, like you said, like Patagonia, kind of posting the more aspirational stuff, or the environmental stuff. If you are a new brand and you think, like, obviously, the USPs for your product, like if it keeps, in the tumbler example, keeps ice, for longer, keeps everything colder for longer, or hot for longer, whatever, what the like functional USPs are. But as far as social media content, you don't just want to keep pushing like colder. How do you advise people to kind of maybe play with the kind of content that they are posting to see like what resonates best? Because getting into the Facebook groups part, obviously, once you have that community built and you can ask them, it's easier. But before then,
totally. I think knowing your target customer and doing that work of asking, like, we're used to thinking about our target in terms of demographic. Where do they live? How much do they make? What is their age? What is their belief system? Maybe, but less so. We don't really ask, like, how do they use social? How do they use the internet? What are they looking for? What are they doing? Are they on all day? Are they just on at the end of the day, passively scrolling? These are some of the questions that can help figure out kind of where to start. Yeti, I should have given an example for pillar 1, whether that's like camping content or tailgating content, right? And you're more talking about what makes for a great tailgate, but you're subliminally messaging that Yeti cooler right there is keeping everything so cold all day, right? So that you don't have to go home early, so that you never run out of cold refreshments or whatever it is. So I think it's when you're first starting out, I think being experimental, something that I really like to do is doing a competitive analysis that doesn't necessarily only focus on direct. Like, competitors kind of widen that definition of competitors. So for example, adjacent sort of industries leaders, right? So folks that we know might share. So someone that shares Yeti's target market could be Patagonia, could be someone else. But so, okay, they have the same target market. What kind of content is working really well for them, especially in that pillar 1 segment? And what can we learn from that and kind of bring over for us? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really smart. Who?
Yeah, exactly.
Could be Burton.
Definitely Burton.
Oh, Burton.
For sure. I'm sure there's been some photo shoots at Burton with some Yeti product in it for sure.
Probably. No, that's really, really smart, because like you wouldn't want to, and the only other like Tumblr brand that comes to mind right now is that Arctic brand. I don't know if that's Walmart's brand or who owns it, but like you wouldn't want all of that content to look the same, right? But it makes sense to not mirror, but kind of complement some of the content that goes along with those complementary products or, things. So how have
I was just going to say, you kind of want to like look at both what is our white space, what is nobody doing that we can kind of capitalize on, and also what is working well with beauty, fashion, like where you're able in really crowded markets to say, okay, no, this is the nuanced kind of target market that we have. They share that, and we can kind of look at what's working well there.
And so how have you seen over the years, like you started doing social media pretty heavily about 11 years ago, you said, and TikTok didn't exist. I know it's weird to imagine a world without TikTok. Like TikTok didn't exist.
We do it all of our time. I don't know.
Well, I know. Like Instagram didn't have reels. Like you said Instagram was new in those days.
Yeah,
I got one way later.
I remember when stories came out, it was a big deal.
Yeah. Like, so how have you seen the usage of these platforms change over the years, especially Facebook? Because you keep hearing like you keep hearing like the youngest generation be like, oh, that's like for old people. And then I'm like, I think it's really easy to like send group messages and like events and things like that. So like, how have you kind of seen the usage of it change, for the benefit of like an e-commerce business maybe, or just in general?
Yeah. It's so interesting. This isn't a direct answer to your question. I feel like there's so much in that question you just asked. I think, the way it has changed is that there's just so many more options. I think when I was thinking just this morning, I was writing an email about how 10 years ago, there was no such thing as like a social media expert because everybody was new. And so there was no such thing as social media education. I mean, for the first 5 years of my career, I was every day trying to find anyone online to tell me how to do the things that I was trying to figure out how to do. And I mean, it really didn't exist until a couple of years ago, from what I can tell. And so now it's almost like there's so much information that it's not actually helpful because we don't know how to prioritize and we don't know what is actually applicable to our brand. We have a lot of content creators teaching on social strategy, which is not oftentimes the same social strategy that a product or e-commerce brand is going to use. So it can just get a little muddy. And yeah, I think that with more channels, like for example, I think of TikTok really as a pillar one platform, right? You're not selling as much, you're building audience there. You have a huge opportunity to build organic audience there. Whereas with Instagram, you could kind of think as a full funnel platform. Reels might be your pillar one and feed posts are your pillar two. And pillar three is kind of behind the scenes story content. Like you just have more options to think about how someone consumes content with each feature. And with Facebook, it's funny. I think I'm not necessarily the biggest Facebook fan or Zuckerberg fan, but you can't deny that it is the most effective platform. When people say Facebook is dead, I'm like, I mean, no, it's still, user base is still growing. Every account, we have dozens of clients and it is the most efficient for return on ad spend 95% of the time. So, and then with groups, it's true. I mean, they have really, their user experience for groups is second to none. And I think sets the bar, and hopefully we'll see kind of the emergence of more sort of private community platforms coming out. I know there's Mighty Networks, but I've tried to use others and nothing really compares to Facebook groups. So yeah, I think Facebook groups is a really, really valuable place to connect with your community when you think about that retention and loyalty, especially for kind of two types of brands. One, if you have a new product that kind of doesn't have a lot of knowledge around if you're kind of like in an emerging industry. And then two, if you're in a really crowded space, it's an incredible way to differentiate yourself on that kind of customer support and building education on your product line and driving higher customer values. It's just, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity.
And so what kind of like content, I guess, would you recommend that people are, releasing through the Facebook groups? And because I think back to the brands that I really love, and I've talked about them a bunch, but the athletic apparel brand IAB, I love their shorts. I have no less than 15 pairs of these shorts. And I would love to be, I would be happy to be in a group, but what are they going to tell me that I don't already know? Like I know how your sizing works. I know that the no ride is actually no ride. I know they feel like butter. Like what is going to be the benefit to the consumer being in that group, and what kind of content can a company post?
Yeah, in that instance, I think I would be doing two things come to mind. And I'm saying in that instance because it's like, you already know you love those shorts. Being in their Facebook group isn't going to sell you more shorts. But in that instance, I would say, number one, when we think about that pillar three, where we're thinking about what stories matter to our customer once they're in our world. So do you want to see about their supply chain? Do you want to see about their carbon footprint? Do you want to see stories like day in the life of their employees? So stuff like that. I think a private environment with your most loyal customers is a really interesting place to drop content like that, see what performs well, and use that to inform PR campaigns or other content on other platforms. The other thing that would be huge, and I'm sure really fun for you, is product development. Like, ask people, if you're kind of developing your line for 2 years from now, bring your customers along for the ride, have it be a private group to kind of like have some confidentiality around it, but get folks to vote on new profiles of shorts, new colors, new fabrics, and bring them along for the ride would be really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
How does that even start though? Because my question before that was like,
first
of all, what are the groups? Well, no, I was going to say, like, how does a brand decide, hey, I want to start a Facebook group because I think it's a great step for pillar 3. It's when do you decide that you want a Facebook group, or if it even would be beneficial?
Yeah,
it's really interesting. So I think that I'm not sure that this is totally correct, but from what I have observed, it seems like Facebook groups for business have been kind of, digital brands have kind of led the charge on that. So it's something that you see a lot in the digital marketing, like online education industry. And I can speak from experience here where we were launching a product, we were launching it really fast. We were definitely like agile startup mindset and approach. And our thought process was, let's just invite everyone who buys from us into a group so we can talk to them and we can figure out. And it was very much from a product development standpoint. So I think that is one instance where like brands are moving really fast and they want to be able to just, it's a lot easier to bake that in from the beginning, and get thousands of folks in there in the first year than to say 5 years later, okay, let's see how many people we can get into a private group and do a whole separate email campaign for that. And some people are like, no, I don't want to. But if you bake it into your DNA, that's really, really valuable, and your customers just come to learn that. But then alternatively, I think for crowded industries, that's a huge differentiator. And so that might be a reason, I was working with a natural cosmetic brand line, and we were just talking about how like kind of ingredient science, things that are maybe not as sexy on Instagram or TikTok and that kind of thing, but that some customers do really want to know about. Well, and we were really one of the first brands to be truly natural, truly clean. Well, if we were to create a group on that had education, we could really position ourselves instead of just saying in marketing, hey, we were the first. Like, let's walk the walk and bring experts in here, bring dermatologists in here, bring ingredient scientists in here, and that kind of thing. So I think that the motivation can be different, but those 2 instances where we're rushing to market, we're new, we're creating a new space, it'd be really smart to do it on the front end. And then alternatively, we're in a crowded space trying to figure out how to differentiate ourselves or how to convince people that, we have better customer service or a better community, that kind of thing. That might be 2 reasons why you'd say, let's do this.
Very eloquent. Yeah, no, it's something I never really thought about. Maybe they just don't like me enough to invite me into these groups, but it's, or maybe they just don't do them.
It's not that. There's this one brand called Salt Cup. It's a women's period product. And they're one of the brands that I think do it the best. There's not really that many e-commerce brands that do it. And they're amazing. And it's in there, that community is really talking about anything. It's like a safe space for women to talk about things that, they don't normally have a space to talk about. One of their rules is like, this is a safe space for TMI kind of thing. And so there's that, but then there's also what's incredibly valuable for them is, they have a community manager in there, but their customers are doing customer service for them. People have product questions and their customers are answering because they're such evangelists of the brand. So I don't think you're being left out. I just don't think it's really happening as much as it could be. But that's an example of a brand that's doing it really well.
Gotcha.
Have you looked for a group though, Francois? And I'm thinking of a group specifically.
Four Sigmatic. No, I haven't. I'm a big Four Sigmatic coffee drinker, big fan.
They would be I don't know if they have a group, but they would be a great candidate for a group. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think I spend enough time on Facebook to. I go on there for work mostly. Yeah, I don't live on Facebook. But yeah, no, I guess it's something I never really thought about. And then when it comes to customer service, are you sort of saying that's where the brands will handle the bulk of their customer service? Like they will say, hey, I have an issue with my shipping or it's been delayed. Let me take care of that here.
Yeah, it's funny. My husband was waiting on an e-bike. I can't remember the brand now. Aerial Rider, maybe. I don't know if that's the product name or the brand. And I was teasing him because it was so, the supply chain has been
that's ridiculous.
A nightmare.
And he couldn't get a hold of anyone. I was teasing him that he had been completely scammed. And they actually were just they weren't answering emails, but they had a Facebook group and they would drop updates in there every once in a while, which I don't know that was necessarily the best customer experience, but there are brands that do that. And I think, but I don't think that I would recommend, that being all of your customer service. But it's true that I often advise brands, because within social media inside of our scope, a lot of times is community management, which you think of as responding to comments, liking people's comments on your stuff, looking at user generated content. And I'm always look, we can do this for you. But if you have a customer service person, that will be so much more resource efficient for you because they can soft sell your products. They have every answer. They'll answer it quickly. And so we don't really necessarily need you to pay us to onboard to the depth of knowledge those folks have if they already have it. And so kind of putting a customer service person on email, on the phone, in a Facebook group, and on your Instagram feed is what I would do.
Yeah. And there's a lot of Instagram pages that consumers kind of just use as customer service regardless. If you ever go to Wayfair, Costco, they're where's my order? They
100%.
Yeah. Wherever folks can get a hold of you, they're gonna air
and
their
you always have the option to have a community manager be please email us at, but it's so much more powerful to have a customer service rep be it will be at your doorstep on 125 or whatever, and see that level of responsiveness. Or if they're answering product questions, then they're answering it in front of everybody else. That might end up selling a couple extra units. So, I mean, everybody's dealing with you do the best with the resources you have, right? But I think it's a really good thing for brands to think about is kind of putting customer service on an external communication track
as a secondary tier for customers, not your sole. I have seen it's either Mercari or Wayfair or someone that their Twitter even says just DM us your product, your account information or your product information, and we'll get back to you, which I find amazing. I'm not even that much on Twitter. I just stumbled upon it, and God, I feel like I'm everything my mom and dad used to say.
I knew you were going to say that. I feel the same way. Yeah.
But when it comes to creating groups for brands, I know you mentioned it's something that would be great to launch at the very beginning. But for brands that have been established, and a lot of, I think, particularly e-commerce brands, didn't even see where the industry was going to take them. Some of them just blew up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Is there any effective plan of action to start to get into Facebook groups and start to, aside from just blasting out, let's say, an email campaign, hey, join us? Not that many people open emails anyways. Is there a good way to start trickling people into their own Facebook groups?
Yeah. And whether I just clarify whether it's Facebook groups or an owned kind of membership environment, where you are really owning all of that data. If you had the resources to do that, that would be my first choice. But I think, and anytime I have to figure out how to get a lot of customers to do something extra, my mind just goes to a contest of some sort. So hey, whether it is new product development and we're going to choose one person that gets to choose the final design, or, you have to decide or figure out what is the most motivating for your customer. It could be a chance to win a $500 gift card, whatever it is, make it juicy. Enough to move thousands of folks to take action. But I would treat it like a product campaign, and kind of have really clear messaging about there's a short-term why and a long-term why. The short-term why is the motivation and incentive to take that action and get in there. The long-term why is what you have to sell them on of And if you don't win, this is the benefit, right? You get to be involved in these conversations. You get a behind the scene look. Maybe you get a monthly update from the founder, whatever it is. And so I would treat that as like at least a week-long campaign. You're blasting it out over all of your consumer channels and making it really worth people's while for both the short and the long term.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of giveaways and contests in general.
People love them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're familiar with it yet, but Twitter has, well, if I am, you probably are. Twitter has a voice space where it's almost like a clubhouse sort of thing. Have you seen any brands start to incorporate that into their use?
Stumping me on this one. Yeah. No, but I should. I'm going to go look at it tonight.
I just saw it earlier this morning, but it's like you could get, I think, 10 or 20 people in a private group. I don't know how you can, I'm sure you could find some ways to do it, but I don't know if brands are going to be able to use that at scale. Maybe you could record it and then release it or something. I just saw it as another space that you are able to interact with some of your customers as well.
Yeah.
On Twitter.
Yeah. Focus groups maybe for bigger brands. I feel like that's something that smaller brands could really use, but the bigger you get and then the more exclusive that becomes, but maybe focus group style stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Now, so when we're working with Facebook groups, and in my mind, the only reason that I would probably join a Facebook group is if it was exclusive to deals. If they told me, hey, every Friday we'll release a new 25% off deal or something. But do you see any companies having less or more success with sort of that third pillar of trying to convert people rather than just giving them information?
Yeah, I think that when we're thinking about it in terms of, I love that idea of an exclusive group where you're getting discounts. I think when you're thinking about a really huge consideration when you're thinking about like more or less success and should you start a Facebook group or bake that into your brand, it's really important to remember like this thing is going to need life. And so unless you can, a weekly discount is great, but people probably won't see it unless there's action happening every day. So engaging posts every single day. And so even if it's just a community manager dropping in a meme or, a like little nugget of info or whatever it is, I think the more active that you are from the very beginning, the more active your community will the community will snowball it for you, but you really have to start it. And so brands have a lot more success with it when they're ready. Like when people are first getting in, they're seeing that there's action in here. It's fun to be in here. They like the people in here and it's worth clicking on once a day, even if it's for 30 seconds and seeing kind of what's happening. So it's definitely not successful when folks or brands kind of let it simmer and get quiet. It's much harder to revive it than to kind of keep it lively. Does that answer your question? I don't know if it did.
Yeah. I think in regards to answered a few different parts of the question, actually. Because my next question was going to be and it's going to be different for every brand, but what type of content, I guess, is the most engaging content? Yeah. It's going to change, obviously, person to person. If you're targeting 18-year-olds versus a 30-year-old dads, it's going to be completely different.
Totally.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I think those like discounts are, so I think of, in marketing, you have external communication and then you have these internal sort of communication and campaigns. And so like, for example, a lot of e-com brands are working on product lines for 2 years from now. So I think in private exclusive groups, your target market is changing, right? So if on Instagram and TikTok, I'm talking to the prospect and I'm talking to my customers too, and I'm nurturing their loyalty, but inside of an exclusive group, now I'm talking to the loyalists. These people are bought in, they are here with us, like for an extracurricular, they're like hanging out with the brand, right? That's something that they want to do. So they must be pretty bought in. So I would be really thinking about like, how can we take them behind the scenes and bring them in to sort of more of that internal communication, like even just dropping a mysterious, clip of something that says like, oh, we're working on this. Can anyone guess what it is? Or we're working on a new product line. Which color is your favorite? Or we're going to do a day in the life with an employee. What would you like to see? A product developer, a marketer, or the founder? You know, and I think that's the type of content is you're really shifting towards like, if you had an internal, you know, when we were at bigger companies, sometimes there are internal like social media platforms where people are updating each other on what they're working on and that kind of thing. I think it's more closely overlapping with that when you think about the market in there being people who are really your loyalists. And from there, I would say, I guess, when kind of taking that tack with the most loyal customer you have, I think it's a great place to be seeding for like referral programs and understanding if you do have a referral program, hey, how's it going? What else would you like to see in our referral program? Maybe creating contests in there for like leaderboard sort of stuff with referral programs and stuff like that.
Yeah. When you were talking before about like engaging the evangelists and like the loyalists, I was thinking that's a great place to find all of your people for like referrals or affiliates or something like that. But to go back to something you said before, because I have a girlfriend who runs a Facebook group for her side business. And when she was kind of figuring everything out, she's like, I don't get it. The views on my posts are going down, the engagement's going down, but she was posting almost too many times a day.
Yeah.
So can you give any like, maybe up-to-date information if you have it of like what the algorithm prefers right now for posting in groups? Because I know there's a limit and it's like a fine line.
Yeah. I think the key is, I mean, I don't know if I've ever posted more than once a day.
Okay.
And I think it depends on how big your group is. So if you are on the smaller side, you might want to post once a day or 5 times a week. And then once you have thousands of people, if there's a lot of posts happening, you pull maybe it back to twice a week, 3 times a week. And you let those conversations happening. I think the most important thing is to make sure that post that you're dropping in there is asking for like engagement, right? If there's a specific ask, and I think it can be really informal. It doesn't need to be kind of as formal as sometimes you see like calls to action on social posts that don't get a lot of action. But it could, you know, I don't know. It depends on kind of what everybody has in common inside of the group, but keeping it really informal. What is everyone working on today? That's a really easy thing for people to answer. And it's a really good like distraction. We're all looking for something to procrastinate. We're like, I'll just type this here. I'll get focused by writing, you know, it's really basic social stuff that will get people don't have to read a lot of copy to kind of get the gist and get to their part where they can talk about themselves. Those are some of the tips I have for kind of driving engagement.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, people do love talking about themselves, but that's
as part of social media.
Well, it is.
Them, yeah, like creating a space where people can talk about themselves is a really great strategy.
Yeah, but I mean that's even going back to the beginning. Like when you go to a party, you want to find a commonality between the two of you. It's still talking about something that you like. Like my opener is always going to be, "Have you seen New Girl?" Because I can talk for hours about that. But you know, it's and you know, I think it's funny because if you're going to have a Facebook group or something like that, it's really important that it doesn't feel like marketing all the time. Like you have to take it off topic sometimes to make it feel authentic. And that'll keep people around and make them feel like, you know, folks are actually, or the brand is actually invested in them. Isn't there even like a 90-10 or like an 80-20 rule about the kinds of content that you want to be presenting either in a group or like in your Instagram feed? It's like you only really want to be like promoting a small amount of the time.
Yeah, I do think that that is a rule. We use a 80 and 20% would be how much you're selling. We do a 50-30-20 baseline. So 50% pillar 1, so 50% just shareable social content. 20 to 30% is the sales content. 20 to 30% is kind of the brands behind the scenes content. And that's obviously on a dial. If it's Black Friday, sales, Cyber Monday, you're going to crank the promotion all the way up, but it should mirror, right? Like it needs to mirror the funnel. If it's a percentages game, we need to invest more in demand generation, in audience growth so that we have more people to close. If we're living down here, it's very unlikely that we're generating new demand. But that's something that is often overlooked. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And do the groups give you any sort of insights or data? Does it tell you your demographic and men versus women, all that?
Yep, it does. Same thing as like you can get similar stats as you can on your Facebook page. So that is really interesting. Like it'd be really interesting to compare your data for your Facebook group to the rest of your social channels. Usually you'll see a little bit of a difference in who follows you on Instagram versus Facebook and so on. And, I mean, even just like for us in our instance, when we used it, I mean, we just threw people. I thought I was going to have a free Facebook group for 2 weeks. I just wanted to make sure the product was working. And now, 20 months later and it's still kicking. But we saw that folks I had kind of had an original concept for a product and I thought it was going to be too vague and I didn't think it would sell. So I baked the concept into the product that we ended up going to market with. And within 2 weeks, saw multiple people asking about that thing that I had mentioned. And so even just that, even without asking people about product developments, like in a formal fashion, just creating a space, inviting people in and watching the conversation is one of the reasons why our brand has had so much success, because we just listen to what people are saying and meet them there. So it can be really, really valuable.
I love that. And kind of just a final question, kind of some more of the fun stuff before we wrap up, because we are getting close to time. Aesthetically speaking, how closely should your Instagram mirror let's just say your Facebook? Because like TikTok, you can't really aesthetic. I mean, you kind of can, but it's more, it's video as opposed to still. How close should those match?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this depends so much on the brands, because it's also a question of like how close should your Instagram match your brand aesthetic. And so there are certain brands that are legacy brands who have a serious like design approach to both their Facebook and Instagram, and some that won't even go on TikTok because it's pretty impossible to be on brand on TikTok and grow. And so it really depends on how you're using it. And then it'll depend on how content is performing. So for example, we have clients who, it's basically a mirror image and that works for them. Both profiles are growing. And then we have folks who will kind of do like a 90-day. We always start with the same content because we don't want to make, specific is great, but like we need to test our assumptions. So what we'll do is do same content 90 days and then see, like this type of content is performing way better on Facebook. This type of content is way better on Instagram. And then we'll start to adjust from there. But I think, the pillar 2 posts, if you have a physical product, we see actually a pattern that with physical products, engagement levels actually increase if the brand is in there. So if you have a logo on the product, keeping it on there. And so just that alone, even if all else is different, having your pillar 2 posts with the logo in it will kind of draw that, like bring it together, make it coherent across those 2 platforms. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. You're right. It is very hard to keep on brand on TikTok. It is funny though. Do you know the TikToker that wears the blue cardigan and sweater and the glasses and then does like the back and forth between him and his wife? He puts on the wig. He has even said before in the TikToks where he doesn't wear the sweater, they don't get any engagement at all. So like as a person, I guess you can be branded.
Totally. Yeah. Something recognizable. Yeah. When you find that trigger point that your audience likes, keep it around.
You got to keep it for sure. Well, Katie, thank you so much. Why don't you let everybody know a little bit more about where they can find more information about you and about your business? And we've talked a good bit about kind of what you guys do, but maybe just a full layout of what Katie can help them with.
Yeah, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for having me. So kwcontent.com is our agency's website. And then strongbrandsocial.com is where we kind of package up everything we do in our agency, and there's links to Strong Brand from KW Content. So we specialize in branded high performance social media, and so we do everything from content strategy to planning to production to social advertising, the whole thing. And we package everything that we would do in what sequence if you were our clients, and teach you how to do that in Strong Brand Social. So same thing. My Instagram handle is KW Content, and that's where you can find me.
Beautiful. And is there a specific sized business or maybe like a sweet spot of business that works best to be your client? I never know. I can never phrase that question well. We've done this for 90 some odd episodes.
I understood. Yeah, I think our agency, so it's interesting because we are definitely a premium social media marketing agency. And so you would need, the brands on that side are a little bit bigger, right? Their budget and their order of operations, like they're selling, they're scaling, and they have, our value proposition is kind of like you can get a full kind of department of specialists for the price of like one kind of marketing employee. And then Strong Brand Social, we just did a consumer insight survey, and I think 95% of the brands in there are anywhere between 6 figures of revenue and 5 million. So on the, smaller side, but all small businesses, I guess, because the small business definition is something like under 100 million.
It's weird.
Yeah. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
It's something ridiculous.
I mean, you find different definitions, but yeah.
Ooh, I was about to say that seems that's
seems
good.
large to me, right?
That seems large.
100 is medium size, maybe 50 is, but yeah. Anyway, this has been so fun, you guys. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on. We've really learned a lot. I mean, just ourselves. I know everybody else listening did too. So it's been awesome to have you on. And thank you for everybody who tuned in today, either by YouTube or podcasting platforms. If you guys liked what you heard, be sure to give us a thumbs up, comment with your thoughts, subscribe to the show, ring that bell for notifications, turn on those automatic downloads. And that way you'll never miss a conversation with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Katie Wight. Katie, thank you so much again.
Thank you. See
you
soon.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.